My name is Olivia Calderon, and I'm with the New America Foundation, a national nonprofit, nonpartisan policy institute based in Washington, D.C., and in Sacramento. And on behalf of the California Women's Legislative Caucus, the California Commission on the Status of Women, the California Women's Agenda, the Joan Kroc Institute for Peace and Justice, and the New America Foundation, it's my pleasure to welcome you here to today's Asset Policy Forum entitled Women and Wealth, Strategies to Thrive in Tough Economic Times. In 2007, the New America Foundation launched the Asset Policy Forum to connect policymakers with advocates, community-based groups, and a slew of stakeholders with the most recent research, perspective, and practice of asset building issues impacting Californians. See, asset building policy is about new ways of broadening the middle class, to give all Californians, especially low-income Californians, access to tools and incentives to build savings and wealth. Wealth that enables individuals to stand on their own and to thrive. We know that Californians are facing what for many seem to be insurmountable challenges when working hard to build assets and savings for education, retirement, for home ownership, entrepreneurship, and to be able to bear this economic crisis. Currently, over 30% of California households are asset poor, meaning they do not have enough savings to subsist at the poverty level if their income were to stop unexpectedly. For these families, they have no cushion to be able to deal with a financial emergency if they lost their job or had an accident or had to pay unexpected medical bills. And when California families cannot save for their future, they can't buy a home, let alone keep it, or start their own business, or invest in their kids' college education. While this is an important issue for all Californians, it is of particular interest for women, which is why we're here today, to explore why women have a particularly challenging time in establishing financial security, in building savings, in building wealth. And we're here to explore financial empowerment strategies to get women, to get families on the path to financial security, to saving and investing. And to speak on this important topic today, we have Assemblywoman Lori Saldana, Mariko Chang, Claudia Wieck, Pharesee Hogan Rolls, and Deborah Lindholm. I'm going to introduce our panelists in the order of their presentations, but I'll begin by introducing Assemblywoman Lori Saldana, who will be sharing a few opening remarks. Assemblywoman Saldana is now in her third term of the California legislature and is the chair of the California Women's Legislative Caucus and a member of the Commission on the Status of Women. She was first elected in 2004 and has focused her legislative efforts on increasing affordable housing and expanding the use of green technology, improving educational opportunities for military families, and affirming civil rights while dealing with issues of hate crimes. Mariko Lin Chang is joining us from the East Coast to share her research on the gender wealth gap. She's the author of a forthcoming book on the topic. She's a PhD in sociology from Stanford University and was an associate professor in sociology at Harvard University, where she published work on the ways that policy influences occupational sex segregation in different countries. Following Mariko, we have Claudia Wieck. Claudia Wieck will be talking about state and national entrepreneurial opportunities for women, as well as policies moving forward in Sacramento. She's currently the CEO of the California Association of Micro Enterprise Opportunity. and a statewide network of 130 organizations and individuals committed to promoting economic opportunity and community well-being through micro-enterprise development. Claudia has been a pioneer in the field for over 20 years. Foresi Hogan-Rolls will be discussing the various financial empowerment strategies that are underway now throughout California. She's the president and CEO of the Community Financial Resource Center, a certified community development financial institution that targets business owners and low-income communities throughout Los Angeles. In addition to various boards and commissions that she sits on, she is a member of the California Commission on Economic Development. And finally, we have Deborah Lindholm, who will be describing how her work impacts low-income women's ability to build savings and assets here in San Diego and abroad. She's the founder and CEO of the Foundation for Women, a foundation dedicated to eliminating global poverty and by creating and funding microcredit programs locally and globally. Deborah is a member of the Women's Leadership Board at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University and a board member of the International Women's Coffee Alliance. Please join me in welcoming Assemblywoman Lori Saldana, followed by our panelists. Thank you.
Oops, I suddenly got much taller. I'll move this one. Thank you, Olivia. And I have known Olivia since I was first elected, and she was working in Jenny Oropesa's office. At that time, it's now Senator Oropesa, but at that time she was an assemblywoman running for the Senate. And I can remember watching her in action. And I will just tell you, as chair of the Legislative Women's Caucus, I'm always encouraging women to run for office. I am always encouraging women in their communities. Oh my, there we go. Women in the communities to be involved. And if you're not interested in taking on the challenges of being an elected official, and these days, who would, I think, nonetheless, there is a tremendous impact that you can have by volunteering, by doing civic work. And as I look around the room, I see many, many of you that I know exactly through that, through volunteering, through education. And so I just want to thank you, because I know that the women in this room are really up to big things in San Diego and beyond. So thank you for the work that you're doing. It is important for women to be planning long-term for their economic futures, because we do live a very long time right now. As somebody who has been an educator, I found when I was looking at the governor's proposals to change the pension system, is this going to keep happening? Maybe I should just switch it off and use this one. Pop it out. We'll see if this one's more consistent. So as someone who has been an educator, when the governor proposed a few years ago to revamp the pension systems for teachers, I was very concerned, because I knew the majority of educators are women, and women live longer. Now I was getting into feedback. We're doing okay? And sure enough, and I did some research, and it turns out that women teachers live even longer than women in general. And if the average lifespan, the life expectancy for women now is somewhere around 80 years old, and women who have been teachers are going to live even longer, we are talking about needing to save and plan for a future that goes on to almost a century of life when you think about it. And my grandmother lived to 97. My mother just turned 80. She's doing, oops, this is still going to cut out. I really don't know. Maybe it's because I divulged her age. But I realized, my gosh, I need to be planning for the long term, because all indications are that I will be here a very long time, and I probably won't want to be working every day during that time. So on a personal level, making sure that women are planning for their long-term financial futures is very important. And when Olivia approached me and said she wanted to do a program like this in San Diego, I immediately agreed and put my staff to work on planning for this. So I'm very happy to see that it's such a successful turnout. And When we look at the panelists, they have such expertise on finance, investments, on microfinance, and on supporting women in business, making sure that women have access to capital, which right now is a challenge for everyone. And as I chair the Women's Caucus and we talk about legislation that impacts women's lives and families, we're very concerned that women make up greater numbers of the elderly living in poverty. And of course, one of the targets of cutbacks this year has been on in-home support services. And anyone who has used it, including my family who have used in-home support services, which allows seniors to stay independent, to live in their homes, but with assistance, knows that it is a tremendous investment that offsets costs otherwise that would go to taxpayers. Because many people who wind up living in assisted living do that using Medi-Cal or other funding. The quality of their lives decline. I think the lack of social interactions in many of those facilities contributes to a much less rich life and environment. So the Women's Caucus has made IHSS and caregiving a focus and a priority of our work. Likewise, young women living in poverty, we want to make sure through education that that doesn't happen, because we see a direct tie. The better your education, the greater your chances of having a job that's not a service level or a low income level job, that you have more opportunities throughout your life to continue to learn skills and advance in whatever career path you choose. So access to education is ultimately the ladder that will lead to a more secure financial future. And what is happening right now, the budget is stalled on funding for education. So we're really looking at how do we give young people today the same opportunities so many of us who grew up in California had, going through a very high quality public education system. And then finally, another priority of the Women's Caucus is the CalWorks program, because we recognize that there are times when single parents need assistance to get skills and training while their children are young. And it is difficult, if not impossible, especially in today's high unemployment rate, to go out and find a job and support your family while you're struggling to go to school as well. So one of the proposals that we have made would allow for a single parent with children under 1 year old to stay at home. Just stay at home and make sure that that first year of development, they get the focus of a full-time parent, as opposed to what we've in the past said, which is you need to go, take classes, look for work, put your child in daycare. And I'm sure any of us who have been through that know that any money that you earn part-time immediately disappears when you're paying for childcare and daycare. So we're really looking at how do we adjust the state budget to the realities of a high unemployment market. There are no jobs out there that have typically been available for somebody who's getting started with very little education and skills. And how does that reflect on women, and especially women who are single parents and are struggling to make sure that their children get off to a very healthy start in life? That First Five Commission, are you all familiar, I hope, with First Five? You know, those first 5 years of development are absolutely critical to make sure that our children get off to a good start. So those are the types of priorities we have. And I just will say that we are very well served by having Noreen Evans, she's the Assembly Budget Chairwoman, and Denise Ducheney, Senator Ducheney from San Diego, who chairs the Senate Budget Committee. When you have two women that have the type of, and especially Ms. Evans, who's raised 3 children, she's now a single mom with 3 kids in college. So anybody who needs to be concerned about how to manage your finances, we have 2 women that really understand what it means to women in this type of an environment to be a responsible parent and provide for the future of their families. So I just wanted you to know that the state budget, we're very close. By close in California, that means within a few $100 billion. I'm sorry, a few $100 million. We don't have a few $100 billion. We have a budget, an annual budget of about $100 billion, probably less this year. A few $100 million is what we're down to. And that's actually not very much in the grand scheme of things, but the battles over the future of education, you will hear that over the next few days. And it is an essential vision, as more of our school children are women, more in higher education, more students in higher education are women. And I'm sure you'll hear from the panelists that explain why women are taking to higher education in greater numbers, even as it's becoming more expensive and students wind up leaving college with greater and greater debts that set them back in their future opportunities to invest, whether it's in a business, it's in buying a home, or just, again, setting up a savings plan when they are paying down sometimes tens of thousands, or even in some professions, hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. So I want to thank the New American Foundation for their research, their education, for putting together this panel. We need to break these cycles of poverty. When we have women and children growing up in poverty, we know that their health declines. We know that often they turn to taxpayer-assisted services. And when I taught for the community colleges, our goal, I worked with a lot of CalWORKs families, our goal was always to invest in them, because we knew that even a small investment over time would result in tremendous outcomes, that they would leave that pattern of poverty within their family that would contribute to the community at large and ultimately to the state as a whole. So I'm very committed to maintaining access to education and other services at a time in people's lives when they do need them, and encouraging those who have the skills and are working to give back and make sure other people have the opportunities that so many of them had to get started in their professional lives. So thank you again very much for being here. I know that we're all going to learn a lot from the panelists who are just excellent on these topics, and I look forward to listening to them. And any feedback you have, please make sure you send that to my office as well. Thank you all very much.
Mariko will be joining us next, and we are just going to set up her PowerPoint presentation.
That's fine. Thank you. It is a real pleasure to be here today. I might have come from the East Coast, but I am actually a native Californian. I grew up here in Northern California, so yay! So my heart is definitely in California. I still have many family members who live here, so I very much care about what happens in California and to the women in California. But what I'm going to be talking to you about today is not my personal connection to California. It's the gender wealth gap. I'm going to be talking about what it is and why we should care about it. Now, we're used to thinking about women's economic status in terms of their income or how much money flows into the household over a period of time. But what I'm going to be arguing is that we really need to pay attention to their wealth, which is the value of their assets minus their liabilities. Assets include things like money held in checkings or savings account, any real estate or businesses that you own, and if you're fortunate enough to own any bonds or mutual funds and still have any money left in them, that would also be an asset. Hopefully there's a little bit left. Liabilities, on the contrary, include things like mortgage debt, credit card debt, or any other types of loans. So why should we care about wealth inequality specifically? Well, first, income inequality is much, much greater than wealth inequality. Just to give you an example, in 2004, the top 1% of the population earned 17% of the income, but owned 34% of the wealth. In contrast, the bottom 60%, earned 22% of the income and held only 4% of the wealth. Wealth also confers many benefits that income doesn't. For example, it can generate further income, for example, through rent or dividends. It can be used as collateral for loans. It can be passed down from generation to generation. And in current economic times such as these, we're made even more aware of the importance in having wealth for weathering financial crises, such as the one we have currently. So what about the gender wealth gap specifically? Some may wonder if gender differences in wealth are really important, given that so many men and women do marry. Well, currently, about half of all households are non-married households. So this tells us that gender is very salient for a large percentage of the population. Also, about half of marriages end in divorce. So if there are any financial benefits to women in marriage, those will end for many women. Even if women remain married, they are much more likely to outlive their husbands. And for most people, widowhood is not a financial windfall. Currently, about 1 out of 5 widows live in poverty, in comparison to about 1 out of 20 married households. Also, people are marrying at later ages and spending more and more of their adult lives unmarried, meaning that there's large percentages of women's lives that they need to be able to take care of themselves. And as already has been pointed out, women need more wealth because they live longer than men. On average, about 6 years longer, unless I guess you're a teacher. Then I guess it would be even longer than that. So good for teachers. They need more wealth, however. Okay, so to examine the extent of the gender wealth gap, I used data from the 2004 Survey of Consumer Finances. Now, this is a national survey that's carried out by the Federal Reserve Board, and if anyone knows how to measure wealth, I can assure you that they do. Now, I can't tell you how wealthy your next-door neighbor is, but I can tell you how much wealth the typical person has. So to do so, there's 2 measures at our disposal. One is the mean, which is simply the mathematical average. But because a very small number of people, not to single anyone out, but someone like Bill Gates, for example, is extremely wealthy, that pulls the average higher. So for that reason, most scholars on wealth inequality prefer the median. So simply, if we ranked households according to lowest wealth to highest wealth, the median is simply the point at which half households have less and half have more. This is considered a much better representation of kind of the typical household. Whoops, oh no. Can we go back? How do I go back?
Push the arrow down.
Sorry, that's never happened to me before. Okay, phew. I don't want you to miss this important slide, although it is in your handout. Here, I've displayed the median wealth for households in 2 groups. One is all ages, and the other is households ages 18 to 64. Now, most of my research actually focuses on households younger than 65, so a lot of the information I'm going to be presenting pertains to that group. However, I've also looked at data for other ages and across all ages, and I can assure you that the trends and the findings that I present here hold for all women, not just those that are under 65. The married and cohabitating households are in green. We have single men in blue and single women in pink. Now, each bar represents the median wealth of each of these different household types. Married households are by far the wealthiest, but what I want to point your attention here to is the gender wealth gap. You can tell that at least for people under age 65, the typical single male owns about $28,000 in wealth, and the typical single female owns, in contrast, about $10,000. So this leaves a gap of about $18,000. And for most households, this is a tremendous amount of money. If we convert this to a ratio, then women own only 36 cents for every dollar of wealth earned by men. You can see from this table that the gender wealth gap remains at every income level. In fact, it actually increases as income level increases. It also holds for every age group. Single men in their 20s, for instance, have a median wealth of $1,100, whereas single women in their 20s have a median wealth of $0. Another way of saying this is that more than half of single women in their 20s have no wealth at all. You can see that with age group, the wealth gap increases and becomes very substantial for men and women in their 50s, 60s, and above. Just to take a slightly more detailed look at the gender wealth gap, I've divided the single women and men according to whether or not they've ever been married, are divorced, or widowed. And in each category, you can see that the typical single woman owns much less wealth than the typical single man. For never married women, the difference is about $14,000. It's about $25,000 for divorced women, and about $45,000 less for widowed women. The wealth gap also persists by race. Women of all races own less wealth than men of the same race. And Hispanic women fare worst of all, with a median wealth of 0. So once again, this tells us that at least, or more than half of Hispanic women have no wealth at all. Now, I'd like to be able to tell you that the gender wealth gap has been decreasing. However, since 1998, it's actually been increasing. This shows that from about 1998 onward, not only is the wealth gap getting wider, but in terms of constant $2004, women in 2004 were doing worse than they were in 1998. Yeah. It's also important to know who is most economically vulnerable. So these people are wealth poor, meaning that they have no wealth at all. They have no savings, no house, no retirement assets. It also includes people who have negative wealth. That's probably a term you might not have heard yet, but these would be people whose assets are actually, the value of their assets is lower than the value of their debts. And actually, since this data was compiled, the numbers have grown much worse. But you can see, at least in 2004, about a third of single women would be classified as wealth poor. So why is there such a large wealth gap? Well, many people would posit that earnings is a likely factor. Nationally, in 2006, women earned 77 cents for every dollar earned by men. And actually, in 2008, it increased, I think, to an all-time high of 78%. So this is the gender wage ratio for full-time year-round workers. You can see that California is actually doing much better in comparison. In California, women earned 83% of men's wages, actually giving them a rank of number 4 across the 50 states. So that's very good news for California. However, while I don't have any information on the wealth gap for California, I can speak about a group of women who are doing very well with respect to the income gap and show you what their wealth gap looks like. Here, I've displayed the median income and median wealth for women across different marital status categories. And the point that I want to make here is looking at never married women. Here you can see that never married women have almost closed the income gap, earning 95% of the male earnings. So this is definitely something to celebrate. And you would think that they would be doing very well wealth-wise. However, when we look at their wealth in contrast, we can see that they have only 16% as much wealth, despite having almost closed the earnings gap. So if income were the primary cause of the wealth gap, then we would expect that never married women would be doing fairly well. But we don't see that. So why not? Clearly, income is important for understanding the gender wealth gap. I don't want to tell people that income is not important because that's not the case. But the income gap is not the only answer. Other factors are also very important. In fact, the gender wealth gap would remain even if men and women had equal incomes. So how can that be? One of the primary reasons is that women are more likely to have custody of children than men. Most custodial parents bear a disproportionate economic responsibility that impedes their ability to save and invest their money. 2 or more cannot live as cheaply as 1. And because they have the economic responsibility for caring for children, they simply have less money left over at the end of the month. So what that means is that even if men and women had the same incomes, women would have less wealth, all else being equal, because they're more likely to be custodial parents and more likely to have less disposable income that they can use to save or invest. In addition, women are less likely to have access to something that I've termed the wealth escalator. Now, the wealth escalator helps people translate their incomes into wealth at a much faster pace. The wealth escalator actually has several components, but I'm going to be talking about fringe benefits, which is one of the key components. Fringe benefits are varieties of forms of compensation that employees receive in addition to their regular income. Some fringe benefits like pension or retirement benefits or stock options help put wealth in the hands of people directly. Others have more indirect effects by providing things that people would ordinarily have to pay for, like health insurance, life insurance, or paid sick days. Now, women have less access to the wealth escalator because of the types of jobs they have. For example, women are more likely to be employed in the service sector, and employers in the service sector are less likely to offer fringe benefits. Also, women lose out because they're much more likely to work part-time, and part-time workers often do not have access to those benefits. And women work less continuously over their lifetimes, making it more difficult for them to accumulate wealth in retirement accounts, for example. It's also important to point out that women's ability to build wealth is hampered by the debt anchor. Women have more debt, they have higher interest rates on debts, and they're more likely to have subprime loans. For example, one study revealed that even with similar credit scores, women were 32% more likely to receive subprime loans than men. So what am I hoping that you'll leave here knowing about the gender wealth gap? Well, first is that wealth is a much better indicator of financial well-being than income. So we need to start thinking about wealth as well as income. The wealth gap is absolutely larger than the income gap, and it's been getting larger over time. About a third of single women have no wealth at all. And if we look at gender differences in median wealth, there's an $18,000 difference between the wealth of single men and single women. And if we convert this into a dollars and cents ratio, that would imply that women have only 36 cents for every dollar of wealth earned by men. I just want to let you know that in the fall, I'm launching a new website that will contain data and fact sheets, easily accessible information on wealth for women, as well as the types of assets and debts that they hold. I'm hoping that this information will be useful to all of you who are actually in the trenches providing policies, and you can have data to explain why we need more to be done for women and wealth. So I want to thank everyone, and I'm very happy to answer questions after all of the presentations.
Thank you, Mariko. Wow, thank you for painting such a shocking portrayal of the gender wealth gap. Claudia, please join us. Oh, if you'd like, yeah, would you prefer to do that? That's fine.
And I can look at my notes without putting my glasses on. I'm so glad I was able to come right after Mariko, because her information just reinforces why I've been doing this work for so long. Since really 1987, when I started the Renaissance Entrepreneurship Center in San Francisco. It was to create ownership. That's what it's all about. And I think that's why a lot of you are here today, and why I'm also so proud to be here right next to Faresi, Hogan Rolls, and also Deborah, who are members of Cameo, because they are on the ground doing this work. And Faresi, too, is one of the godmothers of the field, so has a lot of wisdom to share with you today. First, let me just tell you again what Cameo is. We're a statewide association umbrella of nonprofit microenterprise development organizations and people who support us, like Olivia. There are roughly 80 such programs in California, and 69 of those are our members. What is a microenterprise? It's a business of less than 5 employees, usually a self-employed, single-person businesses. Needs not a lot of capital to get started, usually under $35,000. And when we talk about microenterprise development, we're looking at the low and moderate income sectors and communities throughout California. So Cameo members are up in Mount Shasta and Eureka, all the way through the Central Valley, and down here through San Bernardino and through San Diego. And there are a number of programs in San Diego. And outside there's a handout that has a map of California, and you can find programs, that represent the whole gamut. Microenterprise development is a tool that really works to address these issues that Mariko so beautifully described. It harnesses the entrepreneurial potential of women. Microenterprise development comprises business planning training, individual consulting, loan packaging, business incubation. I think you have a couple incubators down here. And also the small loans. And when we talk about a micro loan in California in the U.S., we're talking about loans generally under $35,000, although some people like to say $50,000. I think it depends on the economy. But they can be from $500 to $50,000. Last year, the Cameo members I showed you on the map served about 14,000 low and moderate income women. Altogether, they served about 25,000, and about 60% are women. And of those women who started their businesses, 80% make it through those 3 to 5 years after startup. Also, what's significant is that they create an average of 3 jobs, usually a 3 to 5 year period of time. So when you're looking at microenterprise development, you have to think about it's not some quick fix, but it's something that over time really strengthens our local economies. And women in particular, and particularly now in our time of very high unemployment, are more likely to be in self-employment, whether it's as a alternative to wage employment or as a way to supplement their family income. Women's Initiative for Self-Employment, one of Cameo's members in the Bay Area, published a study called Closing the Wealth Gap. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it. Good. You can find it at their website, which is womensinitiative.org. And this study revealed that women of color in particular increased their average household income by 40% and increased their wealth, their net worth, by 48% over those clients of their program who did not start a business. What's really exciting is that 20% of their clients who started businesses reported owning a home. So this bolsters the case for microenterprise development as a tool that really works for creating economic security for women. As I mentioned, low-income women are more likely to seek self-employment to supplement their family income. And now with our unemployment rate, well, the true unemployment rate, if you count underemployed, is now cited at 20% for California. And it's really closer to twice that for communities of color. But my own experience, and Cameo has been putting this out into our policy work, that 5% of the unemployed in California could be successfully self-employed if they had access to business assistance and capital, similar to my colleagues here on the right. So that means 50,000 women in California could be successfully self-employed. Just think of that. That's a lot of jobs, and it's a lot of potential jobs, too. Let's see. I think microenterprise is really an opportunity. It provides us with an opportunity to stimulate local economies. Oh, good, Lori, you're still here. Now I'm getting to my point and the policy implications. It's really the American way. It's our competitive advantage as a culture, is that as our entrepreneurial spirit, our ability to take risks, our ability to start microenterprise programs on a shoestring budget, but no more. We're empowered. But I don't know if you were aware, and particularly our colleagues from Sacramento, on how little stimulus bill money is coming in for small businesses, is coming in for women business owners, is coming in for microenterprise. More programs like Feresi's are serving more Main Street businesses that have been abandoned by the banks, and certainly here in San Diego, where you have just huge falling in home equity, you really are feeling that pain. And women tend to finance their businesses from their home equity. So you're seeing sort of a double whammy from businesses that were strong and seasoned are now coming to use the services of nonprofit microenterprise programs because they can't get help from the banks. Cameo's members that I mentioned, the 69 members, reported that they would be able to grow 5-fold if funding were available. And yet, recently, I learned from you and Roberto Barragan at Valley Economic Development that the community development financial institution grants that come from the Treasury to nonprofits ignored Southern California microlenders and gave very little to California in general. I mean, like, why is this happening? It's because we don't have a strong enough voice in Washington, frankly. We're too far away from Washington. So what can we do? Women's Legislative Caucus, please help us to request Senators Boxer and Feinstein to repurpose TARP funds for microlending. We're very close, but we really need some additional support for that. The Workforce Investment Board has $400 million for job training in California for jobs that don't exist anymore. Some of you may have read the New York Times article last week that talked about the failure of retraining. We could use these funds for self-employment training and capital. The law says that we can, but the regulations need to be reinterpreted, and we need some pressure from the state legislature on the State Workforce Investment Board to give that flexibility so that those funds can be used by my colleagues here on the right. So good you're sitting here so I can point to you. In San Diego, you could see an impact in the expansion of the Mabuhay Alliance, of Accion San Diego loan program, of the Foundation for Women, and from your Women's Business Center. All of these very critical programs could benefit if the Workforce Investment Board funding were available. These women, and I want to leave you with one more thought, and I want, when you think of women-owned businesses, think locally owned businesses. Because these businesses not only hire from the community, they circulate revenues in our local economy. The taxes they pay, the multiplier effect of paying rent, of their vendors and suppliers that they use. This wonderful book called Small Mart Revolution documented what we've all known intuitively, that locally owned businesses circulate revenues in the community 3 times that of chain stores. I know some of you are in areas which are very mall-dominated, but if you can find those small, locally owned businesses, please, and women-owned, of course, please try to support them. And I know that through the websites here of the Southern California and in San Diego, you will be able to be linked to the directories of really excellent women's businesses so that you can support them.
Thank you, Claudia. I imagine that folks are going to have follow-up questions on the policies that you've described and those opportunities that are out there to be able to support the great work that you're all doing. And it's a great lead for Faresi to follow up on the incredible work that's already happening throughout California to empower women, low-income women, middle-income women in Los Angeles and throughout.
Excellent. Thank you so much for inviting me here, Olivia. And I think it is a great lead. I think the framework set up by Dr. Chang is perfect to get us in the mindset of what it is that we are all working toward. It sort of repurposed in my mind where my focus needs to be as I'm raising money for people that need more assistance, usually that are working at the low income level. And then for Claudia to set the statewide stage to come to what we do on the ground. I like to call what we do shovel ready. You know, the term shovel ready tends to lend itself to bricks and mortar. And quite frankly, we have the core competencies in our organizations. We are on the ground. We're shovel ready. We just need the infusion of capital. So I think to repurpose some of the economic recovery money into micro enterprise development, poverty, I like to call them poverty elimination strategies. Our goal is not to alleviate poverty, but how can we eliminate it? And through these wealth creation strategies, I think that's a way we can do it. I have one on the ground real-time example of what Assemblymember Saldana was saying about educators. I have an aunt who lives in Missouri, a very small town called Boonville. She's 98. She was an educator. One of the few African-American African-American educators in Missouri who was part of a lawsuit back in 1972 because women who were non-white did not get the same teacher's retirement as those that, yeah, that's right. So they won the lawsuit, and back in, yeah, I know. Back in 1984, she actually got to regain that money. They gave it back to her, all that she had lost from the time that her retirement started and from the time she started teaching back in the 40s. Oh, my goodness. So she is now retired over 30 years. She's been retired almost as long as she taught. She taught 45 years, and she does very well. But my point is her husband died about 30 years ago, shortly after her retirement. The good news is she lives in a small town, and she's been able to make it, and there's a ton of us nieces and nephews that, bless her all the time. So that's really important. Educators live a long time. That was my point. And my second example, if you see me yawning, my aunt, her first cousin, my mom's oldest sister, is here visiting me from another small town in Missouri, Marshall, Missouri. She's 90. And just talking about women and outliving their spouses, her husband died about 3 months ago. And as soon as he went on to glory, we said, yay, she can travel because she's in really good shape. So she traveled. She kept me up until 3 o'clock this morning chatting about going to the rodeo this weekend and how I might be able to do some work around some of the ideas that she has, and she's 90. So I think this is a perfectly timely conference for us to start talking about wealth creation. So our strategy. We are Community Financial Resource Center. We reside and focus in Los Angeles County. And when I say shovel ready, our programs have been around for well over 20 years. I mean, I entered the field back in early 1990, Claudia in the late 80s. A number of us have been on the ground. So I hate to keep saying, or I really don't like continuing to say that we're a pilot or we're a project. We are really an industry at this point, and our job really is to get the word out some kind of way. I mean, we continuously think of ways on the internet. I heard of, Facebook, YouTube, all those things. But honestly, public service announcement campaigns probably do the trick on buses, bus benches, etc. What do? We have identified through our work, and particularly with real results. I mean, these are not results that we're thinking it might work. Oh, maybe it'll work if we had this. We actually know that our revolving loan fund, which is only about $4.5 million, has been recycled at least 6 times over the past 14 years that I've been at our organization. Our organization has been around since 1992, shortly after the LA unrest. And in that, we know that we've had a direct impact on small business and women in particular. About, even though we target low-income families, the majority of the families that come to us are led by women. 65% of our participants in our programs are women and single family head of household with children. The average number of children is 2.5. So I said, where'd that half come from? It's either 3 or it's not, right? So, but we know that there's about 3 children per household. And what we find is when they get these small amounts of money, as has been demonstrated internationally, we utilize the Grameen Bank model of investment into low-income families called Capital Partners. We've taken that model and adjusted it to Los Angeles County. We know that when they start their businesses, it's typically a part-time business. And the purpose, as a lot of what Claudia said, so I won't repeat that, but we know that it's income patching. It's a way for them to earn extra money that they can help pay for books and so forth. So really investing in the strategy of microenterprise can be a statewide policy that is shovel ready. We have a network of organizations on the ground. We know the job creation is there. In our organization in LA County, we've already have documented over 1,100 jobs that have been created over the past 10 years. We're part of the Aspen Institute micro-test study. If any of you want to go to Aspen Institute, there's a lot of data on their website on microenterprise and the work that's been done, a lot of longitudinal studies that can give you the data that will help you in your own communities and help us with our legislators to help them come to some supportive measures that would create new policy statewide. The other thing I think is really important right now is as the world has aligned itself, we have a first lady who understands what microenterprise is, and having her lead the charge, I think, is even more valuable. I can say that with confidence because she seeked us out as an organization in LA County and said, hey, we understand you're doing microenterprise, and made it a point to come and visit our women, interview them, and it's part of her We Connect initiative. So there's a push, but even with that, we still need our legislators, and I love it that we have Assemblywoman Saldana there. Assemblywoman Karen Bass, our speaker, is actually my representative. So I feel like we have the leadership, along with the Women's Caucus, to really make a push. And I'm going to take a leap out there and acknowledge that Assemblymember Saldana also serves on the California Commission, as I do, and I think we have a critical mass. We can push a little bit and do one of our meetings focused on women and wealth. I think that would be really awesome, and what the job creation would look like. The final thing I want to leave you with, because I know we have a limited amount of time, is individual development accounts. We have a program, as a number of the microenterprise organizations do statewide, called IDAs, Individual Development Accounts. And the purpose of those is to help create wealth using assets. So it's a matched savings program. Oftentimes, it's been used in a demonstration model. Our organization has actually been in 2 demonstrations, which were national demonstration projects through HUD, Housing and Urban Development, as well as the Office of Community Services. What it is for every $1 that a low-income individual saves, they can get a matched savings anywhere, and it depends on the program, from $3 to $5, up to a max of $13,000. And through that program, we've helped over 200 people. I think our number is like 218 people and it's a 5-year program. It's been a demonstration project, so to speak, where over a 5-year period, they have an opportunity to save for 2 to 3 years. They can take that money and buy a home, go back to college, or invest in a small business. We've actually assisted about 175 of those folks actually purchase a home. The economic impact, and this is where I say, boy, I did not use my negotiating skills here. When we went to get mortgage providers to get those loans to our borrowers, and by the way, we have no foreclosures in our portfolio because we did not utilize some of the unique financing strategies. $325 million in economic impact over the next 20 to 30 years as people are paying those mortgages and have purchased homes. So just a small amount of investment. I think our whole program was like, $4.5 million. But as you look at what that's going to be, and that confidence, the wealth creation opportunity for these very low income families, it's just astounding. So I'll leave you with that, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Paresi. It is, it's heartening to hear about all these incredible programs and projects that are happening up and down our state. And in these difficult times, we know, God knows we need them. Deborah, will you wrap us up and talk about the great stuff that you're doing here locally and abroad?
Thank you. Thank you, Olivia. It's just a pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon. I'm so glad, and so glad so many of you came. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be here. The Foundation for Women began about 12 years ago, and we like to say that we are committed to being the voice for women whose voices are not heard. And the statistics of poverty worldwide remain, even though there has been so much effort, energy, and success with microcredit. Still, 1 in 5 people on this planet must live on less than $1 a day. And more than half our human family, more than 3 billion people, live on less than $2 a day. And most of those are women and children. And that is so not okay with me, that I made it my personal mission about 15 years ago to go meet the statistics of poverty. And I met them in India and Africa and in our own community in San Diego. These are real women with real stories, with real children, with real dreams. And they're they're limited only because they do not have access to the same financial services that you and I take for granted and would not be able to function if we didn't have them. So we started funding some projects in India and then eventually got drawn to Africa. And I like to say, you know, the Foundation for Women, God had a good idea, and I was blessed to hear it. But God had a really good idea about 5 years ago and sat down with a couple of our leadership team and thought, you know, there's a lot we're doing around the globe, but what are we doing for women in our own community? So we took the same Grameen methodology. How many of you know the word microcredit? That's fabulous. How many of you have heard of Dr. Muhammad Yunus? He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006. He is known as the inventor of microcredit. So we are very much committed to that model of bringing women together in groups to support and help each other. And so we've had success with funding microcredit programs around the world, but about 5 years ago, we decided to be bold and be pioneers and do two things. One, start a program in San Diego for women who are very poor. And we wanted to find 5 women from that would be willing to form this first group. We were prepared to give them a $250 loan. And it took us a long time to find 5 women who would come together and would borrow $250 from us. And the reason being is poor women don't have the confidence and the courage to borrow money because they don't think they could ever pay it back. So these first 5 women were all refugees from Africa. Do you know that San Diego is a huge refugee resettlement center? We have over 100,000 refugees living in San Diego County, and they come every week with nothing. So these 5 women each borrowed $250, but they had to agree to come and meet with us every Thursday morning at 10 o'clock. So over 25 weeks with that $250 loan, they had to bring $16 to the meeting every week. $10 in principal, $1 in interest, and $5 to put into something they had never heard of called a savings account. So that $16 came with them every week, and as part of this, the women were instructed that this money had to go for income-generating purposes only. This was not to buy a new pair of shoes for one of their children, even though that was a desperate need. The money had to go to income-generating activities. So after 25 weeks, oh, the other thing, so they come to the meeting. If one of them does not have $16, the other 4 have to pitch in and cover for her. So they really understood how important it was, all 5 of them working together. At the end of 25 weeks, they not only paid back, each of them paid back their principal and paid $25 in interest for use of this money over this 25 weeks, but they each had saved $125. So we gave them an envelope with a brand new $100 bill and a brand new $20 bill and a brand new $5 bill, and you would have thought we were giving them $1 million. I was telling Olivia, you know, the definition of wealth. So here's Adama from Sierra Leone, single mother, illiterate in her language, illiterate in English, raising 8 children. She got that $125, and this is amazing. She did it again. She did it again. At the end of her 3rd loan with $375, she bought a dining room table for her children for the first time in her life. She understood what it was then, save to have something, to plan ahead. That never would have happened if we hadn't really tried to be bold in a different way to try and do something for very, very poor women in San Diego. We now have lent, over 500 women have participated in this, on average touching 5 other family members. So it's not just, as we've noted before, it's not just the person who's borrowing, it's all the people that are touched by this one small loan. Our program director is this wonderful woman, Elena Cruz. I said to her recently, so Elena, how many women, if we had access to unlimited capital, how many women could we give a loan to in the next week? More than 1,000 women, she said. We're operating in 7 different centers right now. Women come to meetings every week. I explain to them what's happening in San Diego, in your group, in your center, is happening every week all over Africa, all over Asia, all over Central America, all over South America. Women are coming together to support each other, and by taking very small loans. The first woman I ever met in a microcredit program was in Nepal about 15 years ago. Some of you have heard me say this story, but she was living by the side of the road. She's a landless laborer, she and her husband, and they had 2 children. And if they found work for the day, they ate. If they didn't find work for the day, they didn't eat. She finally got the courage to join a microcredit program, and it took a long time because she was very afraid to take this first loan. She borrowed $4. She had never seen $4 in her life. She bought a comb, a pair of scissors, and a mirror. She put her husband in business as a barber, but she was the businesswoman. And within 1 year, that family was living in a house, and her 2 children were in school, all because of $4. It is so time to think about the energy of this. You know, if someone is really, really poor and desperate, and you give handouts to them, the energy says, you are incapable, you can't do it, I have to help you, I'm better than you. But if you give a loan to someone who desperately wants to make her way for her family, that energy says, I believe in you, I'm going to help you, we can do it together. It's just miracles are happening with microcredit all over this planet every single day, and we just have to find a way to do more. We're solidifying a partnership now with Acción San Diego so that women who are successful with us after 4 loan sessions will be able to have access to bigger loan capital. But we are still loaning only in San Diego $250, $500, and $1,000 loans. And those loans, such a small amount of money, just dramatically changing the lives of women and families in our own community, as well as globally. So I want you all to walk out of here as microcredit fans and spread the story and get involved. There are millions and millions and millions of women screaming for help, and no one's listening to their voice. We must help. We must. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Thank you for illustrating so beautifully what we know from our research to be true. People they can save if we create the incentives and the tools for them to be able to do so, which is what wealth building is all about. And it leads me to a question that I want to ask, and then I'd love to open it up to the audience so that we can get all your feedback and an opportunity to ask your question. From all of your individual perspectives, if you can identify one challenge, what is the greatest challenge that's preventing women from building savings, from building wealth, and getting on that path to financial stability? And if you could identify 1 or 2 policies that should be in place now in your ideal world to overcome the challenge that you identify, what would it be?
Oh, sure. I was so interested in hearing what all the other panelists had to say. From my research, I guess the biggest challenge that I would like to point out is this challenge of single parenthood and custodial parenthood. Whether women are never married or whether they're divorced, this really seems to be one of the biggest impacts on their economic futures and their ability to save and invest. So I think we really need to think about ways to support women and support children, support families. Okay, and support families. In terms of policies, I think that what we're learning from women and children are the need for health care. I didn't mention health care at all in my talk. However, it turns out that health care is one of the biggest stumbling blocks for women and their families in their ability to build wealth. Because if they can't afford to take time off from work, if they don't have paid sick days, if they don't have good preventative care, that can quickly drain any savings that they might have been able to acquire. So healthcare is really, really critical. So I think that's actually an issue that would greatly touch many of these women's lives.
And in some ways, that's why many women start these small businesses on the side, is to be able to pay for health care. And yet we don't have that recognition from the big healthcare foundations about the connection with microenterprise. So thank you for reminding me of that too. I think you've heard about financial literacy. I think if girls were taught about building assets at a young age, I know it would have helped me, and also had entrepreneurial training from middle school or earlier on. And there's some excellent programs around the National Foundation for Teaching Entrepreneurship is one of my favorites. And there's the Youth Business International is coming to California, which will also provide capital and mentoring for young adults, 18 to 25. So I would say financial literacy, training about assets, entrepreneurial training, and the kinds of programs that combine the self-empowerment with the access to information and capital. Women know how to network. They know how to put it to work. It's kind of just getting people pointed in the right direction, giving them support.
Yeah, I really believe self-confidence is one of the things that really causes women to not do what they know they can do. And I think that stretches from what Deborah said at the very earliest stages and the earliest amounts of money on up through, I had a conversation with a business owner who's very seasoned woman, been in the National Association of Women Business Owners for like 12 years, served on their committees, and was literally talking to me about and she'd been bankable. We do what's called near bankable deals, and our loan fund starts at $500 in the micro enterprise to $5,000. And we go from $5,000 to $30,000, and then expansion loans from $30,000 to $250,000. She was coming to us for a $75,000 loan, and I said, "Well, you're bankable. Why wouldn't you go to the bank?" She was afraid. So here's a woman with, 15, 20 years of business experience, but was thinking because of the credit crunch that she shouldn't even try. So that self-confidence piece, I think particularly in women, is important to figure out how we work on that. And I think education is one. I think really just deciding that you're not going to listen to whoever or whatever those naysayers are in our minds. The other thing is I think individual development accounts as a statewide policy in California. We know they work. We already know that. We have evidence of them working for over 15 years now nationally. So take that data and figure out how we can do some statewide policy, because individual development accounts are specifically that. They're asset development accounts, which get people into home ownership, small business, and education. And that's a direct link that we know we have access to. And then, of course, the policies that we talked earlier about for microenterprise and making that a part of the guidelines that our departments in the state already use. It doesn't have to be a new investment of dollars from the state. We all know that the state's having trouble. They ought to allow our women leaders to run it a little better. But, having said that, yeah, thank you. I agree. Having said that, we do need to impact what happens going forward. And I think the more support that we can give to our women legislators that are armed with the information that we're sharing here, the better prepared they are to fight those battles for us and win. So that would be my take.
I'm just desperately working to make sure that the world knows that there is something called microcredit, microenterprise, that the world repayment rate right now for women who take small loans is better than 95%. The repayment rate for men is about 40 and sometimes as low as 10. And that's because of real research and real data. You know what happens to men when they have access to capital if they're really poor? Three things. This is the order. First, alcohol and cigarettes. Second, they improve their ride. So if they're a walker, they get a bike. If they're on a bike, they get a scooter. If they have a scooter, they get a car. Lastly, they think about their families. Women, one and only thing, they think about their families. So we need more access, not only just knowledge that there is something, a way for women to succeed through microcredit, but access to more loan capital so that there is no woman waiting anywhere. Right now, we have over 1,000 women waiting in San Diego. We have 1 million women waiting in Liberia right now. And in terms of policy, I was talking to Olivia about this yesterday. I'm so excited to be working in West Africa, in Liberia. Do you all know they elected the first female president of an African nation? Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, a trained economist from Harvard, beat a local soccer star. I mean, hello. And you know what she has done? She created a minister of gender. There is an entire department that is a minister of gender to make sure that women's issues are as important as any other issue in the country. And she just appointed a special prosecutor for gender crimes. I mean, we need to support the President Ellens of the world, and we need to help get more President Ellens of the world elected. So a gender minister in California would be fabulous.
Thought of one other quickie thing. Most of the local economic development investment is going to business attraction and to big box and chain stores, and to attraction of business from overseas. I'm not saying that some of that is needed, but wouldn't it be great if we could invest a portion? We invest none of it now, almost none, but let's say just take half of that and invest it in locally owned businesses. Now, again, the job creation will take 2 to 3, 4 years. But when you look at what happens to a lot of these companies, they end up not creating the jobs, they offshore them, or they don't stick around after they get these tax giveaways. So that's another thing that we can do, both in Sacramento with business transportation and housing. We've been sort of leaning on them a little bit. We could use some help. And also just in your local economic development offices is to get them to think about supporting locally owned business, because that's going to be women-owned businesses. It broadens the idea of it. That's why.
Great. Thank you, Claudia. We have 10 minutes for questions, and the microphone's moving around here. So I saw your hand go up really fast. Right here, right in front.
Hi, I'm Eunice Christensen, President AAUW, that's American Association of University Women, San Diego branch. They're almost like comments or observations. First, on the savings rate, now for the last 7 months or so, we've actually had a paradigm shift in this country, and we've gone from a negative savings rate to a positive savings rate. Maybe in future research you could see, well, yes, did women climb aboard and figure that out? And I think we may see a baby boomer population adopt the mindset of their parents who went through the Depression, so that there is that we see more of that wealth creation happening through that vehicle. My other comment is on the smaller businesses, the women businesses, the local businesses. We find that at the 1 or 2 or 3 employees, if you get to that stage, there aren't any benefits at that stage, because usually the margin is not there for the business owner. So do we take a more federal look, just like, say, hopefully there's a federal health plan to come in and address that? And how do we have those women go into industries that are not such traditional service industries, rather than creating more beauty shops or whatever along the line there? I mean, I see that as an issue, a technology training. And then my last is the question or a comment to the woman who has is illiterate in her native language and in English. What kind of encouragement is being given to develop literacy to the mother? Because if the mother gets some level of education, then it's going to be so much easier for the children. And so these are just almost like kind of counter thoughts, so that we are really effective on the ground. That's it.
Great. Thank you. Deborah, did you want to address
I'd just say that in most microcredit programs around the globe, not only is financial literacy very much a part of the program, but education is as well, because women know that having access to economic services is not the only thing that's going to end poverty. Education is so key that they ask for it themselves. They want literacy training themselves, but more important, they want education opportunities for their children. So in many programs throughout the world, schools are being built in the same areas where microcredit programs are happening, just so that will change the whole cycle.
And just one thing to add, most microenterprise programs do have an educational component, usually focused around the financial education component, but also if people, and we call it comprehensive economic development. So our strategy is not only to treat just the financial part, but once you really get into the details of microenterprise development, it really is a wholesome, direct path to financial security because we are treating the whole person, and you'll find different components in different areas based on their geographical needs. I hate to get into such detail, but that's really true.
Okay. I tend to start at the bottom because you have your product already with you, the people who are having problems with their children. And I was thinking that with the attitude of not wanting to have sex education anymore in the schools, people don't approve of that. Why not use that money to do an economic education to the people? Why not let these girls know when they're 10 and 12 and 14 and 15 what their financial future is going to be if they don't have the kind of help and information that they need? You have to start, really at the ground level because you're already starting with people with problems. What you need to concentrate are those who don't have them yet. And I think as long as the money is, because principals are given special monies to do special things that they might want to do. And there's a lot of extra money out there that's just being wasted. And the schools, if they can't do sex education, can certainly do something different. And that affects, of course, the sex problem, I hope.
Moderator's prerogative to just weigh in. I'll tell you, one of the New America Foundation, both here in the state of California and nationally, one of our biggest ideas is creating a universal savings account at birth, that every kid in America would have a savings account. It would be an asset building account, and we would seed it with $500, and it would be restricted. You couldn't touch it until you were 18, and you could use it for asset building purposes, to purchase your home or to go to college, to roll it over into a retirement account. But the idea is that you are growing with this account and that you're learning about money management know-how in a very concrete way, that you have money of your very own that you could then manage. And we helped Tony Blair start this in the United Kingdom. Every kid in the UK is a trust fund baby, and it was incorporated into the financial literacy curriculum. So it's K through 12, and kids are growing with this account. And so there are efforts underway to make this a reality here in California and nationally. But I appreciate you mentioning that. We have to start from the very beginning. Absolutely.
My name's Maureen Eberly, and I just have a couple of comments with Deborah's program here. It is so amazing. I went and visited some of these women that are benefiting from the microcredit, and some of them are like selling scarves and jewelry. So I decided, I work for the convention center, so I decided to, instead of amenity gifts for our clients that are tchotchke gifts, to buy these scarves and to put a little note on it and explain why I'm buying it and how it's benefiting. Well, I came back, and this woman came up to me in tears, and she was so excited because I'd bought these scarves from her, and her name is Tsitsi, and she is using the money. Here I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to help this poor woman. She is using it to build a well in her village in Zimbabwe. There are people there that they walk 3 and 4 hours every day for water. We take so much for granted. This woman is dying of cancer, and yet she writes me a thank you note, and so appreciative. She's so selfless. And all of these women there, it's so easy for all of us. It's so easy sometimes to think, oh, I can't make a difference. I'm just one person. Well, there's people all around us. And for these people, so my business, we buy the scarves, we buy jewelry. We're going to have a women's group where we're going to invite these women over so that they can sell their scarves and jewelry to us. I mean, there's so many things that we can do if we just open up our eyes individually.
Absolutely. If we could, we have 5 minutes left. If we could limit the next 5 minutes to questions, it would be great. But know that we're going to be sticking around and would love to continue the conversation then.
I would like to speak and bring light to an invisible and very large group of women, and any of us can be part of that group at some point, and I'd be interested in what sort of research policy, whatever, you can speak to about this group. It's a group of women with disabilities, and a disproportionate number of people with disabilities are women. Of those, a disproportionate are elderly. Of those, a disproportionate have lost, live alone, have lost their homes, are without, are either widows or they've lost, their spouses have left them, and who have had huge medical bills, therefore are in debt, have lost their credit, and I can speak personally, and so have no credit rating, can't borrow any money to do anything to get out of that position. At the same time, because of having a disability and being older, you know, any kind of higher job is not open. These women, including myself, and I used to be a community organizer and couldn't imagine that I would ever spend years behind in a closed room, in a closed door, all alone, but I have, and it can happen to anybody. And we have no voice, because when people are unable to connect, who knows about you? How do you know about them? So in terms of policy and all the rest of it, we need, you know, this light and this awareness brought.
Absolutely. And you sharing that,
Research,
right.
Anything that, or policy, anything that you can speak to.
That's exactly what I was just thinking when you were sharing your comments. I looked over at Mariko and I said, I'd love to see a chart where you break down women with disabilities and their wealth accumulation and how they're affected.
Right.
Right, women in military, absolutely.
Right. I totally agree. I'm almost speechless. I will actually start looking into that, because that is a large group of women. I think it's very important. Check back at the website. I'll see what I can come up with. You can also email me as well. I believe my email is in there somewhere. But what I want to emphasize, and what you brought up so nicely, is that there really is no one-size-fits-all solution. There's many different types of women with different needs and different issues and different strengths. And so we really need to think not in terms of a single policy, but sort of more of a web of policies that can catch women, you know, at different ages and different stages with different issues. And so when we're thinking about women's policies and policies to help people in general, we really need to be inclusive to really make sure that we are not covering just one single type of woman. And that's an excellent point.
I'd like to just say one thing. Thank you for bringing up about the disabled. The Recovery Act has funded our Department of Rehab in Sacramento, or our State Department of Rehab, tens of millions of new dollars. And yet they are very loath to help people start their own businesses, which is so relevant when you're homebound, or if you're even a disabled vet, to be able to work out of your home. There'll be in fact, with the healthcare changes, Obama has created the digitization of a lot of the health records, which would be a really great business opportunity for somebody, just like medical transcription has been. So I'm just saying, we really, the mindset of the Department of Rehab is completely non-self-employment. Could really use help from Sacramento to put pressure on the Department of Rehab to spend that money, which they're allowed to do for self-employment.
Right. We have time for one more question, and then we're going to wrap up. But again, know that we're all going to be here and would be more than happy to continue the conversation then.
How do your programs and policies apply to undocumented women?
We never ask. If a woman, we never ask. In San Diego right now, for a woman to join our microcredit program, she just needs to be invited by someone who's part of the program already. And because that's how they support each other. So a woman in the program knows another woman, she brings her, and we never ask. And I'll tell you one quick story just to finish with this, but that happened a while ago. A woman came to one of the weekly meetings with 5 children. She was homeless, living on the beach. And the group decided that they would all pitch a little money into the center of the table in the circle and would give her a little, some access to some money, and then asked her, what are you going to do with that money? Well, I'll go get a motel room for the night. Well, what are you going to do tomorrow? Well, I don't know. Well, what do you like to do? Well, I'm not good at anything. I'm just a mom. The conversation within like 20 minutes with a group of women came to find out that this woman really is a very good cook and she makes some pretty excellent tamales. Somebody in that circle said, I have 1 extra bedroom in my apartment. You and your 5 children can stay in it for the next month. And the group decided that they would give her a loan of $250. 1 year ago, that was. She now supplies tamales to 5 taco shops in South Bay. She makes $2,000 a week, more than I do. And when one of the male owners of one of the taco shops offered her, was liking her tamales so much, offered her a job for $8.20 an hour if she would come in at 6:30 in the morning and she would work until 4 and she had to do this. She said, no, thank you. I'm a businesswoman.
Right, that's absolutely right. Well, we are going to wrap up, and I know there were several of you that had questions. I'm going to be sticking around. I hope that some of the women here will also join us if you want to continue the conversation. But I just want to say thank you so much for taking the afternoon to join us today, and especially thank you to the co-sponsors, to the California Women's Legislative Caucus, to the Commission on the Status of Women, to the California Women's Agenda, to the folks here at the Joan B. Kroc Institute for Peace and Justice. You were great. Yeah. Thank you all for helping us make this possible. And it really is our sincere hope that this will be the first in many collaborative opportunities for us to continue to explore how we solve the issue of the growing wealth gap, and that we get women and all Californians on the path to saving and investing. Thank you so much, and have a great afternoon.
Are you going to Mexico?